evening, Canterbury. I'm Mike Yardley. Welcome to NewsMakers, where we debate the week's big stories through Canterbury eyes. It's a pleasure to introduce our panel, the editor of The Press, Andrew Holden, from Craig's Investment Partners, Jennie Moreton, and Chief Executive of Orion, also Chair of ECA, Roger Sutton. Thank you very much for joining us. I should point out, by the way, that the views expressed by our panellists are their personal views and not a reflection of the entities they represent. Some semblance of a true race for the Christchurch mayoralty is finally beginning to emerge, and Thursday's theatrics are a clarion reminder that the ECAN takeover will probably zhuzh up the mayoral contest. Speaking of ECAN, Dame Margaret has her merry men. They have been damned as Dad's army by Joe Kane. Your impressions of the appointed lineup? Roger.
Well, I think they look like a pretty strong group, actually. I think we're going to expect... I think a lot of people are very disappointed with the loss of democracy, but I think they're going to be a pretty strong group. They're intellectually really strong. I don't think there's necessarily a whole lot of depth around knowledge of local government, but I think they look like a pretty good group, and I'm pretty confident they're going to do a really good job.
Would you consider it a high calibre assemblage of people, Andrew?
Oh, remarkably so. No, I think Nick Smith's done a very good job there. There's fantastic level of skills and expertise there. I see some criticism of whether there's any independent environmental representative in there, but I think you look at the background of a number of people within there and their involvement in environmental issues, and the fact that they've got a former Environment Court judge means you've got a pretty good understanding of the issues.
Yeah. I get the impression they were very, very keen to get the retired Judge Skelton, because his name was on the grapevine very, very early after the announcement to bring in this appointed panel.
Well, I think if you're going to, which they've done, if you give them the power to skip the Environment Court and only allow challenges under law to the High Court, you've got to have somebody sitting amongst the commissioners who can essentially take that role of an Environment Court judge and say this is a reasonable decision to come to.
What do you think of them?
I think it's a good bunch of people, and I think it's probably a more appropriate bunch of people to be making the decisions that they'll need to than were there previously. And like Roger, I think it's wrong that the democratic process has been overridden here, but I do think these people have something more to offer.
I suppose for Joe Blow public, regardless of who is going to be joining Dame Margaret at the table, the dollar signs make for an interesting read. $1,400 for her, and her troops get $900 a day. Is this going to cause much dismay amongst the wider neutered ratepayer, Andrew?
Oh, that's cheap as chips, to be honest. I think any of these people in the private sector could command at least 3 times that. Goodness me, Mike, you charge me that effectively for your column every week once I think of the time you must spend on it. So
that's true.
No, I mean, I think even for the public service, actually, that's a pretty low rate. So to be honest, my suspicion there would be that, in fact, the commissioners who've put up their hands almost see an element of public service. And I know that might seem silly to people at $900 a day, but really, for their experience, that is a very good price.
Would you agree, Jen?
Yeah, I would. I would. I mean, you know, you've got to pay people for the skills that they're bringing to the table, and you know, you can start comparing what the new people are being paid compared to what the councillors were paid, etc. But I read that these guys were working for 2 days a week, whereas the previous councillors were working for 4 days a week, and I suspect they'll probably get the same amount of work done, if not more, in 2 days. So I have no problem with it.
Roger, as one of the best paid public sector executives in Christchurch, sir, have we got a bargain here?
If I had a major hard problem to solve, I'd feel pretty comfortable in hiring any of those people at those sort of rates.
Yeah.
I know it sounds like a lot of money, but the private sector pays those sorts of rates and more for good quality people. Dame Margaret Bazley, I've had some experience of her, and I think she's actually pretty sharp. And at $1,400 a day, I know it's a lot of money, but I'd be very happy to shell out that sort of my own money if I had a really serious problem.
The headline in the press today seemed to exude a sense of shock at the figure, Andrew. What should we take from this?
Well, there was no editorial message there, Mike. There really isn't a headline. It was arguably it was the most interesting new element that we hadn't heard yet.
Yes.
I mean, apart from the fact of who they were, and we know ECAN's gone. We know Dame Margaret's coming to run it, so that was one element that comes out of it.
Yeah. I think the point that Jennie makes around value for money, in terms of the ECAN councillors were taking 4 or 5 days a week, and these guys are going to take a couple of days a week, is actually a really important concept. Unfortunately, the political process actually often really slows things down with trivial bickering and bantering and all that sort of stuff. And I think these guys are going to be much more likely to get down to business and get this region some good quality outcomes more quickly. So I'm really comfortable.
And it also comes back to that fundamental argument where people seem to think that anybody working in the public sector should be paid less than those working in the private sector. And it shouldn't be the case, because we won't get quality in the public sector unless we pay them market rates, regardless of whether it's private or public.
Okay.
Well, I think in general it's a pity our councillors, actually most of them work pretty much full time. I think we'd be better off in many cases with the part-time councillors, in some cases who are better qualified, had better experience, and I'd be happy to pay them more, rather than a bunch of full-time guys who actually do nothing else, have very, very little experience of other issues at the time.
Just switching to the mayoral race, without wishing to blow my own trumpet here.
You're standing, Mike.
How'd you know? My little piece of the press last Saturday couched the prospect that Jim Anderton is going to take the fight to Bob Parker. That is looking increasingly probable. Do you think, hypothetically, Jim Anderton has the goods to make this a serious, credible, vigorous contest, or is he so last century? Who wants to dare to
I think there's a really important issue coming up for Christchurch, and that is the Auckland Super City. I think they're going to be so big and powerful that they become really scary. And I think really good representation out of Christchurch that means that we can actually hold our own against Auckland is going to be really important. So I think the new mayoral candidates, the new councillors, need to show they've really got their act together and work out how we can actually make sure we're not actually forgotten, and Auckland isn't just the place that gets all the central government attention. And I think Jim is theoretically a guy who could actually do that pretty well.
Wow. Jennie, do you think he's a credible contender?
I'm a bit of a cynic on the subject of local body elections. I will put my hand up and admit this, and I can't believe I am. I don't vote in local body elections. And I get very cross with people who don't vote in central government elections, but I don't vote in local body.
That's selective morality.
I know, but
what
at least
would motivate you to?
What would motivate me is the belief that the council and the mayor are effective. And I don't believe the council and the mayor are effective. And the argument therefore is don't complain unless you actually vote, etc.
Yeah.
But what I will say about the mayoral campaign is, unfortunately, I think it comes down to the best known name.
Right.
And that's why Bob Parker did well when he stood. He was a well-known name. And I think that Jim Anderton will provide him with some competition because he is an equally well-known name.
Interestingly, we could end up with a very crowded shopping place for a new mayor. We've got Liz Gordon, which arguably is going to split the left vote if Jim stands. My understanding is Mark Alexander is going to throw his hat in the ring any day now, which is going to split the right vote. Joe Kane, possibly through the middle. What a fun old time we're going to have, Andrew. What do you make of it?
Oh, it'd be fantastic, actually. I'm looking forward to hosting the debate at the Town Hall. I mean, I think that Roger makes a really good point about Jim Anderton. He would be a very strong candidate. He's got that name recognition. He's got that knowledge. Against him will be the age.
Yep.
He'll be able to tout himself as Mr. Kiwi Bank, the man for the people. So he's got a very powerful argument in that respect. I think what's really important, though, for the candidates against Bob is that they don't just stand and say, I'm not Bob, vote for me. They've actually got to come up and say why they should be mayor, which comes back to your point about the importance of the Auckland, and I only call it the single city, because as far as I'm concerned, that's what it is. It's not a super city at all. You know, they've got to make the case to the voters and convince people like yourself to actually vote, to say the reason I should be mayor is I can do this for Christchurch. It's not enough to come and do a negative campaign.
It's the vision thing. Again,
absolutely. And look, Bob won that on that last time. I mean, you know, all credit to Bob Parker in terms of he stood up before the last election. He said, I'm about big picture vision. I will borrow more to get some more money, which we've seen with Roger's financial manoeuvrings this week with Orion. You know, he's stuck by what he said he would do at the last election campaign. Now, if you want to knock him off, come up with a good argument to do so.
All right. We'll take a break. Coming up, shaking up tertiary education. And hello, Europe. We're flying again. Do stay with us.